Fantastic. So, hello everyone. Thank you very much for joining us here today in the Pulse College Room at Dublin Comic Con. Joining me in this pre-record is Dr. Travis Langley, who's en route to another convention already. You're a busy man on the convention circuits, it seems.
A little bit. I'm doing 11 or 12 conventions this year. But you and I were talking beforehand. I would love to visit yours sometime.
Absolutely. It's one that I recommend to everyone, and it's a very unique experience because I've made it over to New York myself for the New York Comic Con a couple of times, and we have that similar buzz, but there's something that's also kind of unique because it's set here in Ireland. Like you'll have to come over to experience it, but it's a nice melting pot of minds, as it were. But thanks very much for joining us. And I was just saying, as you were saying, we were talking just before the recording, and I was giving you a little bit of a preamble as to what the intention is with the room here. And we have a number of speakers coming in, so folks can attend live portfolio reviews and demonstrations using animation software such as Maya. But we also have a series of guest speakers coming in. And later on in the day or on the YouTube channel, depending on what way folks are engaging with the medium, they're out in the future. We're going to have Will Murray joining us as well, and Derek Tyler, who has the upcoming autobiography of Benjamin Sisko, who'll be talking with us as well. So that'll be more content over later on throughout the weekend and on the YouTube channel. But for yourself, Dr. Langley, really an interesting career you've carved out for yourself. As was it yourself who first coined the title superheroologist? Is that, do I have that down?
That's the superheroologist. It's like we don't say biologist or psychologist, but I wish a different name had been available on Twitter at the time, honestly. But I keep having to tell people about that spelling. But no, superheroologist it was a word I made up for a Twitter handle. It had been inspired by somebody who had called himself a Batmanologist. And I was like, well, I want to look at more than that. So that was originally my Twitter handle. These days, for other social media, it's always Dr. Travis Langley.
Awesome. And you mentioned there Batmanologist as well, because what I first came away with you was with the fantastic Batman Psychology, A Dark and Stormy Night. And we have, I believe it's on its second edition now, is it?
Yes. The books has been popular every week for 10 years, and after 10 years I had more things to say, so it's in the second edition, has new chapters to add and some things to update. And it was like visiting that book again, working on it again was like visiting an old friend. Going through that right now with our Doctor Who book, and I always expected to do second editions of those because I'm a big fan of both, and I always knew I would have more to say about both Batman and Doctor Who.
Absolutely. And Doctor Who, are you excited for the new upcoming series now? It's going to be on Disney Plus for you guys, I think, isn't it?
Yes. I'm always excited about what's coming up with Doctor Who. I really am, even at times when, okay, I question certain showrunners, and I think one recent showrunner doesn't quite get the humor of Doctor Who, but I'm always excited about, it's always changing, it's always reviving. That's what's made the show endure for all these years. And even where I don't agree with some of showrunner Chibnall's choices, I still love a lot of what they did. I love Jodie. I look forward to seeing Tennant again. I look forward to Gatwa. I've been a fan since I discovered him on public television with reruns of the Fourth Doctor way back when.
It's always fascinating for me when I meet folks over in America who are Doctor Who fans, because it seems so uniquely kind of, over here in Ireland we would get the BBC, so that would come over to us from England. But the reach the show has had, and we had Mike Collins with us on panels last Comic-Con in March, and he's the storyboard artist. So, and couldn't tell us a thing, couldn't even blink, got nothing out of him for what to expect. but to swing it back round to Batman, it was really interesting. Like the text, for me, diehard Batman fan, so like it could be a Batman napkin. I'm gonna read it, you know. But for yourself, when you decided to approach this topic, I suppose you must have always been a fan. So this is probably a
Yes.
passion project that began. But then, did you have any concerns that when you began engaging on the project, like what, you know, colleagues might think or the general public reception might have been? Like, would folks have considered, hey, maybe you're just looking too much into something, you know, entertainment wise? You, because my perception whenever, you know, I get really into something as well, I'm pursuing a project, is it's the, you know, a cultural mark it might leave, an impact it might leave, you know, because stories, you know, they can uplift us, motivate us, you know. So I think it is important. And Stan Lee, you know, he was always a big proponent for that, saying the importance of, you know, entertainment as well. But just your perspective, did you have any, I don't know, maybe anxiety is too much of a strong term, but any worries of like, if you were going to release this book, what the perception might have been?
I would say anxiety is probably because I was in a very supportive environment. The particular liberal arts university that I've been teaching at, especially at that time, they were very supportive of creative ways of teaching. We had a professor in the communication department, Dr. Randy Duncan, who he had paved the way for me in that setting. He had been teaching a course on comics as communication for quite a while. He was one of the founders of the Comics Arts Conference, a scholarly conference within the convention at San Diego Comic Con and WonderCon. And so in terms of that, that made it easier. You know, it used to be the professor side of my life and the nerdy side of my life were two different things. And then after I first went to San Diego Comic Con and saw this Comics Arts Conference, saw people engaged in scholarly discussion of comics and people in the audience, you know, who came to hear this, I knew I have to be part of this. And once I started writing in the area and doing panels discussing analyses of comics or how comics affect people, it started to feel like this is all becoming the same thing. And it started to be just the truest to myself that I'd ever felt. And I'd had a different book in mind on the psychology of superheroes, but then Robin Rosenberg did that book. And I was like, okay, well, I can't do psychology of superheroes, but that's okay, because I then started refining how I was thinking about it. And when it hit me, specifically Batman, and my original title was Batman in His Belfry, which I picked up from students. They would not all know what that meant, but still, we surveyed, eventually we surveyed over 500 people on possible titles, and far and away the subtitle, A Dark and Stormy Night. Well, it came to me finally on that subtitle, and I laughed, and I thought, no, wait, he is dark, he is stormy. There are layers of meaning to this subtitle. My wife was like, you are not calling it that, but overwhelmingly, that was what people responded to. But I had a 3-year plan that, because of Heath Ledger's death delaying the next Batman movie, became a 4-year plan. Is that during this time I need to get involved in comic scholarship, do some writing in journals. During that time, I got to do things such as have a convention panel with Michael Uslan, producer of the Batman movies, Jerry Robinson, creator of the Joker, and Adam West, who'd been my childhood Batman. So I'm there up in front of the audience, sitting next to Adam West and these other fine folks. The first line of my query letter to get an agent and a publisher was, Adam West once asked me if I thought Batman was crazy. This book is my answer. And developed the experiences and got to know people, and it's a wonderful thing. You know, these things that I couldn't talk to peers about when I was a kid, I get paid to talk to the world about these days because of this book. And after that book did so well, other psychologists want to get involved. The others are anthologies, but that Batman book, because I want to do one 2 years from now on a different superhero as a sole author again. But that Batman book is very near and dear to my heart. And what we're doing, we're using it. Yeah, we are using psychology to analyze the character in the stories. We're also using the character in the stories to talk about real human nature. So while, for example, talk about PTSD, which symptoms does Batman as normally depicted have? Which ones does he not have? That lets people have an interesting look at Batman, which is what they generally come to the book for, but it also lets me show them that PTSD is not necessarily what they thought it was. So back to your original question, I was not just on a tangent. Back to your original question, when somebody is skeptical about what I'm doing and they realizing how I'm using this to teach the psychology of real human nature, some go, oh, and they start to get what I'm doing. My department chair has never understood what I'm doing, but he's supportive of me following my own path.
That's, you know what, that brings me, first of all, I'm kicking myself because I honestly was thinking of the subtitle, "Does Batman have bats in his belfry?" for this panel. So I might go back and edit that now.
Oh, for your panel, do it. Have fun with it.
And
Someone who doesn't know what the belfry is, they might be all the more curious.
and the second was, in terms of you kind of touching upon the readers, you know, almost like the audience. Did you have an intentional audience in mind while writing the book? Because for myself, I was a history student in college while reading it, and you know, psychology, you know, it wasn't on the syllabus or curriculum for me, and I found text very accessible. You know, it was like a really engaging read, because folks might initially, you know, think if it's something to do with psychology, maybe be too, you know, complex or too in depth to get through. But I found it a very accessible book. Was that one of your intentions as well, as you were kind of touching upon, to, you know, teach, you know, lean people into the subject of, you know, wider psychology, perhaps by using the character of Batman an entry point? Was that always a plan for you? This could be an entry text, like it could be a book for a general audience, or did you have a very specific audience in mind when writing it?
I always had general audience in mind. Accessibility was absolutely important to me. I had a choice between two publishers. One was Harvard University Press. They were interested in the book.
Okay.
And the other was Wiley. And between the two, I wanted the one that would reach more people and that would not be as concerned about impressing an academic audience. Once in a while, I've had some people send to me manuscripts of books they were working on. I don't want to single anybody out. One of them, it's a very good book. The one that's about a particular comic strip, and there's a lot of history in there. Really good information, good book, but a whole lot of the tone is it's reflecting the concern with academic way of speaking, a lecture-like tone. And I had to ask the author, what audience do you have in mind here? And he acknowledged that while he wanted a general audience, he could not get out of the habit of thinking about impressing fellow scholars while writing. And with me, it's like, I don't want the scholars to be annoyed at me, but I would much rather just have them shrug me off. So once my department chair, I had a particular book that I was talking to a publisher about, and my department chair asked, "Oh, so are you going to do this one for you know, an academic writing?" I was like, "No, I've got more important things to do." And I do feel that way. It's we are talking to everybody, even if somebody. There are some psychology classes, AP high school or college, that have used this in 3 of my other books, but especially this one. I'm more. One thing that hit me was that out of the 16 books I've ever worked on, the worst selling one in the bunch reaches more people than I have taught in my entire 30-year career. There are more people that learn some things. People who've told me that they felt better about their own diagnosis because of what they read in the book. People who've told me that they had never heard of post-traumatic growth until they read about it in the Batman book. And the term has become increasingly well known, but needs to be much better known. People who've told me that one of these books, but especially the Batman one, helped them decide to study psychology or decide to go to graduate school or to feel better about being able to find an environment where they could be themselves while still psychologist. And then there are people such as some people have told me Batman saved their lives. Something from the Batman stories helped them break a suicidal train of thought. Or the woman who emailed me, this is about a comment I made in my Star Wars book, but it still fits the same purpose. Uh, the woman who messaged me to say that something I said in the afterword of my Star Wars book was what I said was that the great lesson of Star Wars may be that despite what they keep saying, there is never only one hope. And she said that was exactly what she needed to hear at that particular moment while dealing with her dying father. So this kind of thing touches people in different ways. Story, and you touched on this, story is the most powerful force in the world. You go, story is the most, yes, story is the most powerful force in the world. Once upon a time, the ability to light a fire was fictitious. Stories inspire us. Stories sell things. The car salesman who gets you to thinking about the story of what you will be like in that car will be far more effective at selling that car to you. A story gets you to travel to an interesting place. It affects the way we remember things, inspires us to build, shapes our cultures. The person who wants to make a mark in the world and be remembered by history, that's about personal story. So it's not just fiction, but story itself shapes the world. And we've learned from story our entire lives. Children are learning moral principles through stories that are being told to them. They're learning to read. Children's books are teaching them about manners and reading, cooperation, and reasons to go the heck to sleep. Story is an incredibly powerful thing. We use examples all the time. And so when I'm doing something like writing a book on Batman or teaching a class, every spring I do a media related class. Sometimes it's been psychology and literature, psychology and film. Once it was called Stan Lee Heroes, and I had to emphasize Stan did not create all of these by himself. He co-created, but that had been at Stan's suggestion. Stan had said, you should teach Stan Lee University. I just made this comment to a previous department chair, one who did get what I do. And he said, do it. Okay. But 3 times it's been a class called Batman. I don't have to disguise it. I don't call it the psychology of nocturnal vigilantism. I call it Batman. Only students with the word Batman on their transcripts are in that room.
No, and you've hit upon something there as well. Where I am now, we're in between the academic term. Our academic term in third level usually starts around September.
Mhm.
And so now is where interviews take place for the next academic year. And I'm always at this point saying to our animation students, we teach a certificate and a BA in animation, that, they can't just expect, to be drawing every day, animating and modeling every day. There are the transferable skills, the soft skills that are important. But there's a particular module, animation history and principles, in which there's a psychology module aspect, a class within it. And sometimes it leans more into like the uncanny valley and those type of elements we discuss in broad strokes. But what's become more prevalent to us now in like recent months, in the past year definitely, is the emergence of AI being used as a tool. And as animators, it's really causing pause. Like, will this be our next big tool, or would this be something that might be used to cut corners? And it's been, some are looking at it with trepidation, some are looking at it with excited by the possibilities. But this is why the critical research and evaluation aspect of what we teach at third level is so important. Is that, as you were saying, going back to the idea of stories, that's for us to kind of come up with a way it uplifts, informs the transference of information. And often I'd be looking at, a first year student would be questioning, like, why I'm here to draw Mickey Mouse, but instead you have us, reading this text. Where do we bridge the gap? But it just goes to show the richness of what education can lead to, how it builds, the better stories for it as well.
And that animator who wants to draw Mickey Mouse, that animator needs to have a feel for story. What is Mickey doing? Not just a picture of Mickey, even if it's just one frame, one still. What is Mickey doing in that moment? The animator, the illustrator who has the sense of story will have a livelier image, even if it's just one image.
Absolutely, absolutely. You mentioned Adam West as well, almost use him as the elevator pitch, I suppose, and you're going for agents. Was it your book? Correct me if I'm wrong, but particularly with the passing of Adam West, what kept going in circulation was he referred to himself as the Bright Knight. And to
Yes,
my
that
own
was something he
recollection,
said in a, I'm sure he said it more than once, but he said it, I quote him on that in my book. He said it during a convention panel, with the one that we were doing with him and the executive producer of the modern movies. And that was when we're at those two. I did not know those two had never met in person before. And all those years, they had never met in person before that. And sometimes Michael introduces me to other people as the person who introduced him to Adam West, which has layers of coolness to that. But I've gotten to be good friends. Well, I got to know Adam. We stayed friendly after that, and I've gotten to be very good friends with Michael. So there Adam is sitting between me and Michael Uslan. Because by gosh, I've got Adam West on my panel. I'm sitting next to my Batman. But Adam has this comment about how Batman has many layers to it and is an amazingly diverse character. You know, Adam said, I, of course, am the Bright Knight. You have your Dark Knight. And he was making these comments about how Batman worked on all these different ways. And Michael said that was a particularly important thing for him to think about. And he was very grateful to Adam for saying that. And he and Adam actually worked together later on two animated movies that Adam did before he died.
oh, is that the Cape Return to Cape Crusaders?
Yeah, there
And
was the Return of the Cape Crusaders and Batman versus Two-Face, which was released after Adam died.
yeah, no, that was, it was great for those films, you know, to get made. So I think they were both released, premiered at New York Comic Con. I think I caught them there.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. It's great. It's amazing how the story can go full circle. And also, with regards to about the research for something, not even just the Batman book, but just like, so, as you mentioned, you've written but also edited several more titles as well, ranging from Batman to Doctor Who to Star Wars. The research must, some of that's got to be a lot of fun, I suppose. Like, have you ever
It
been
is.
afforded the opportunity to, you know, access archives that wouldn't be generally available? Or...
It is. It is a lot of work and a lot of fun. You know, when I'm going through hunting through every Batman story. And I remember when I was working on my Joker book and I wanted to find which story called him the Clown Prince of Crime the very first time. And I'm going through every single story in chronological order till I finally find that one. It wasn't quite as early as I thought it would be. And then I worked my way back to make sure it did not appear earlier. It's no, looking through for different themes, looking at different stories. It's this mix. It's a lot of work and a lot of fun. It's the psychology side of it too is fun for me as well. I enjoy looking through the other books and articles, finding the topics that could be interesting and meaningful, finding the sources. There's some of these things we've cited so many times while teaching that it may have been a while since we read the original source, and sometimes I go back there and discover they didn't quite say what we've been thinking that they said, or it's like, that research that we've cited so many times is a little more questionable than I used to think. And so it's on both sides of it, the psychology and the fiction, in this case Batman. It's renewing and refreshing to me as a fan of both, because I love psychology too, and as a scholar of both. It is sometimes weird to hear myself referred to as a world, even quoting this feels weird, as a world-renowned expert on Batman. I have to admit it's true, but it is really weird, and I feel more self-conscious about quoting it.
But it must be weird in a good way. If that's me, I'll have it on a
Oh, in a
t-shirt.
good way, yes.
What I find as a fan reading your works, for me, it lends to the verisimilitude of what I'm reading as well sometimes, because I think what was great in the Batman book was the idea like, oh, it's, it's Batman insane, not for the world he kind of inhabits, is kind of what stayed with me from it. And
You're
I don't know
quoting
if you're
from the
aware.
last page.
It's the from it ends. That's edition one. I'm gonna have to confess I haven't read second edition yet, so I've got to get onto that to get the bonus ones. But it's also available on it's available on Audible, and it's also
It has
available.
been a bestseller on Audible.
Oh, fantastic! Who's the narrator on Audible? I've seen it on the
And
Audible
Audible,
app.
it's still the first edition.
Oh, very good. Okay, cool. And is the plans for the second edition to go up as well at a later stage?
I think they'll discuss that when it reaches time to renew the contract on the Audible. I suspect that will be the case, since it remains a very successful book on Audible. I think the publisher's thinking might be, why mess with that?
Yeah, I get you with the formula. That's where the business end comes in.
Yes.
But with the idea of the verisimilitude, I'm not sure if you're aware of this myself. I've been working on a character called William Lamport, who is actually a historical character, but he's actually the real life inspiration for Zorro. He comes from Wexford in
Oh,
Ireland.
okay.
Yeah, and it's an amazing story. As a young boy, he was basically he committed pillory against the King of England while he went to London to study, was abducted by pirates, joined the pirates, forged documents to get in with the King of Spain, and then became a spy in Mexico for the King of Spain, and then decided to rebel against the Inquisition there, and wrote a Declaration of Independence that predates France. It's an amazing story, but that's where the idea of El Zorro, when he escaped from prison, the fox and all, originated from it. You can find many papers like Patio Zorro and stuff. You find many of them. The historians like to get the spoke in, but what's amazing is when I began working and reading about Lamport, there was a clear connection then, which went from Lamport to Zorro to Douglas Fairbanks to Bob Kane, Bill Finger to Batman, and something that's kind of drawn out was like this kind of, they're completely different though as individuals and people, but it's something that's fascinating in when you find something that can just be a key to a great enjoyment, adds to the verisimilitude, the truth, the reality when the story being told, the fiction, but it can also sometimes look for amalgams or real life analogs to some of the characters. While working on any of your books, like even the Doctor Who series and Star Wars as well. I know Spider-Man is the latest that's been out as well. Have you ever looked for like real world analogs or case studies, I suppose, and when writing on a fictional character or case study, have you ever drawn parallels or anything like that ever, tweaked in your mind, gone, this reminds me of, possible, scenario X, Y, Z?
There are definitely those. There's certain ones, especially when I was working on my Joker book. There are real life criminals when you're trying to understand a complicated, chaotic character like the Joker, and you don't know for sure what goes on inside his head, and for storytelling purposes, that's best. The Harley Quinn aspects help me get the book a little more grounded in terms of the fiction, but trying to deal with this character who is so dangerous, so murderous. I looked at a lot of real life criminals, serial criminals, especially certain ones. One in particular who I will not name him. It's very clear when people go through, who I'm talking about, but I don't want to justify him by saying his name. And I'm not talking about the guy who shot up the theater in Aurora, Colorado, who actually did not say he was the Joker, despite that having been mistakenly reported. But one particular real world serial killer, but there are some others too. I say, looking at those individuals, I had to take a 6-month break from working on the books after doing the Joker book. But there are real life examples. There are real life heroes. Elie Wiesel, John Walsh, Candace Lightner, who all went through terrible traumatic experiences, but then used those in their own post-traumatic growth. Of Christopher Nolan said he thought the key to understanding Bruce Wayne was Theodore Roosevelt, who'd also grown up in a well-to-do family, but had been taught values by his parents to look out for others, and he had traumatic things happen, and then returned reinvigorated and with the things that he was doing. So yeah, sometimes it definitely hits you, certain real life analogies, but I'm very careful how much I go into those. If it's a living person, I say very little. You don't want to get to sounding like you're speculating about the psychology of the real person. Even if it's somebody who did, I'm still concerned because, okay, they're gone, but there are real people in their lives. I'm definitely wary of talking about real life victims because I don't want it to ever, even though sometimes they are absolutely the analogy when I'm analyzing a particular fictional victim. I really don't like talking about details too much of the fictional victim, of the real life victims, because they have families, they have people in their lives. But I also feel like they should not be minimized for the attention given to the criminals who hurt them. It's a bit of a balance there. And so yeah, there are absolutely real world analogies that cross my mind when I'm writing. I don't tend to talk about them in too much detail in the fiction, even if they are in my mind.
Absolutely. Okay, no, that's one, and the Theodore Roosevelt as well. That just actually rang a bell in my mind as well, because I think Michael Uslan, did you ever read Detective Number 27?
Oh yes.
Yeah, I think he kind of hit on the same vein as well. I think with the character as well. I wonder if he and Nolan ever discussed that. I must, if I ever see him at a convention, I'm gonna have to pick his brains on that one.
I can message him and ask him.
That's it. We'll have a follow-up message at
Well,
the
like I
end of
said,
the
I'm legitimately good friends with Michael, but no, you want to ask him that yourself.
That'll be my one when he's at a convention. I'll have my back pocket that question ready to go. I have we're almost coming up to time, so I promised 30 minutes as well. I know you're in transit as well, but I have one nerdy comic book question I gotta get off my my chest and ask you as well, which is gonna be Dark Knight Returns. You're probably gonna know where I'm gonna go with this, but with Dr. Wappler as the character in Dark Knight Returns and Miller's interpretation, what did you think of the whole approach to Harvey Two-Face, the Arkham in Dark Knight Returns, interpretation of the Joker? Just because I think you would be the only individual I have ever come across in a professional capacity who might have an informed opinion of those characters in that story, and that's one of my all-time favorites. And then I even in the animated film they did that Jay Olivia directed a few years ago, I always love it when Wapley, he has like the psyche is like a moist membrane when struck recoils, and he has all those metaphors and expressions. My question is just merely, did you ever, when you went on profession and went writing, any opinions on those characters at all? Did you get a good laugh out of them yourself, or maybe I'm completely wrong? Did they ever strike gold without me realizing, just being a reader, and anything that they were saying within the context?
Yeah, the Two-Face and the Joker, as they're depicted in The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So these are very specific depictions. These are versions of the characters who return to villainy when Batman returns to the town. As well, Harvey's got his own other issues involved there, and they both reflect how incomplete they are without Batman. They personally, as depicted in that story, especially the Joker. The Joker's been in a catatonic state until he overhears the news that Batman's back and he lights up. And Two-Face within that story, it's like, do we go into spoilers for a story from the 80s or not? Two-Face,
I think we're safe.
Harvey's face has been fixed, but in Two-Face's mind, now they're both monstrous. Of course, Harvey's face has actually been fixed in at least 9 stories over the years, and he always reverts to villainy, usually deliberately scarring himself to return to villainy. But both of them, these are two who particularly reflect and distort Batman. All his best enemies do, one way or another. The Penguin is more a reflection distortion of just Bruce Wayne, but we're getting into Batman himself here in The Dark Knight Returns. It is an exploration of Batman, is you do, and more on the aggressive side of Batman. So the Riddler's not the right villain for that story. The some certain others are not the right villains for that story. It's the Joker and Two-Face. Of course, the Two-Face, where it's like Bruce Wayne down one side, monstrous looking figure on the other. It's like Batman and Bruce Wayne at the same time. And now in Two-Face's head, he's just the monster. He doesn't have, the Harvey side. So he's lost the Bruce Wayne kind of part of himself in that depiction. So he's also more fully reflecting what he sees of the monster. And so he feels even more tied to Batman as a whole than before. The Joker, who just flat as he is going to try to get Batman to kill him, and to so he can win on that once and all for all. I guess in case Batman goes away again, it's time to just go ahead and get it done. He's had this stuff brewing in his head for decades. And while a lot of people think Batman kills him in that story, Batman does not actually kill him in that story. Batman wounds him, leaves him with a broken neck, and the Joker twists himself to kill himself.
Yeah.
He still feels like he won because he got Batman to put him in that position. And I can keep rambling about these depictions of those characters in the dark. One thing about it is I don't talk a lot about The Dark Knight Returns in my book. I do refer to it, but I don't talk a lot about it because I'm trying to because there's so many versions of Batman. It's why chapter 2 is which Batman. I'm trying to concentrate on mainstream depictions of Batman to at least narrow my field down a little, and to get a little bit aside from somebody blowing off what I'm saying, because they'll go, "Oh, well, that's not real Batman. That's other Batman." It's like, well, they're all fictional.
Yeah, it's Miller himself actually, I think, put it in the best way, which is Batman's like a diamond. Doesn't matter what way you tell the character. He could be Lego Batman, he can be Dark Knight Returns Batman, he could be West, he could be animated series. Keaton, no, it's all resilient. It's just once it meets, the certain elements of the character, it's just there. So, and again, as I was saying earlier, it's the book that you've written, the other books that you've edited and written as well, and various characters in pop culture as well. It's as just a fan, been a delight to read. I always recommend them because it does help with, from my experience in terms of verisimilitude, but I also, just as, someone on the outside, psychology, I found it so accessible. And as you mentioned, like post-traumatic growth and others, like opening up new points of discussion and reflection. And just speaking as an educator, mental health, and particularly post-COVID as well, mental health is such an important element within work, study, social life. And so it's great to see, individuals like yourself who help sharing like some really useful information out there, and at the same time it's making it so accessible and engaging and interesting for us. So really want to thank you for that. I want to also thank you for your time with us here today, and do hope we get the opportunity to do this again, and hopefully in person, at Dublin Comic Con also. Thank you once more, Dr. Travis Langley. And before you go, is there anything else you want to push? Is there a particular website, blog, or online store, anything you want to just give a shout out to?
Social media, I'm easy to find. Facebook is honestly the easiest way to communicate, as you know. So I'm one of the 10 most followed psychologists on Twitter, a bird that its owner is trying to kill it. It's in terms of finding the books, wherever you find books, most people buy them through Barnes and Noble or Amazon, but they are not difficult to find, especially the newest ones. Yeah, that newest book, Spider-Man Psychology: Untangling Webs, upcoming, the second edition of Doctor Who's, although we had to change the subtitle on Doctor Who. The first edition was Doctor Who Psychology: A Madman with a Box. which no longer holds. So it's now the second edition is Doctor Who Psychology, Times Change, which still has the foreword by Katie Manning, who was a companion to the third Doctor back when, interviews with several others. One of the new interviews is with Christopher Eccleston.
Cool, that's deadly. I look forward to that then. That's amazing. Thank you so much once more. And for everyone else, timetable's out on the convention floor now on the door, and you can watch this back on Pulse Comics on YouTube. Thank you once more, Dr. Travis Langley. Thank you.